What is going on, Snooker fans, and welcome to this week's Snooker Digest episode. Now, before we go through last week's action from Hong Kong, I did want to start this video by sending nothing but love and best wishes to both Stuart Bingham and Jack Lisowski. Bingham, of course, mentioned that he has lost people very close to him recently, which must have been on his mind in that final. And then Jack, who posted that he lost his dad last week too, and the post would suggest that his passing came completely out of the blue, which is just heartbreakingly sad for the guy. And things like this, I think, serve as a reminder that snooker players are just regular human beings. And when you see players pull out of tournaments or go through tough patches on the table, I do think it's important to remember that we don't always know what potential struggles they're going through off the table. And I think the whole snooker world will be behind both Stuart and Jack. Hopefully, we'll see them again this season. Of course, Stuart has now qualified for the Players' Championship, and Jack is now next due to play at the World Championship qualifiers. And I very much hope their respective heads will be in the right place for when they're next on the table. But now if we do turn to the tournament itself, of course, this was the first time that the World Grand Prix hadn't been held in the UK. And it also wasn't on ITV, so not as easy to access for most fans, especially with Eurosport now moving to TNT Sport, which is just an extra subscription cost for snooker fans, but that's a separate video issue that I've got. But nonetheless, it was a very good week of snooker. The venue looked incredible, but it's just a shame that I don't think the crowds were ever quite as big as perhaps was snooker were hoping for, or at least they'd build it up to be. But viewers of this channel will know how I'm a huge advocate of more countries hosting major snooker tournaments throughout a season, so hopefully this will continue to grow in Hong Kong. There were a couple of last-minute withdrawals from the tournament, including from the Rocket again, which means the only tournament left for him this season is the World Championship, and it is a 50-50 at this point on whether he will play in that or not. And I think as fans, we just have to hope that he is in a good enough mental place by April to feel like he can enter, because the World Championship without O'Sullivan would definitely feel odd. The recent World Open champion John Higgins reached a record 147th career ranking quarterfinal last week. And there is something just incredibly pleasing and poetic from a snooker fan's point of view that a new record would include the number 147. I was also checking Q Tracker actually, and John is quite a distance ahead at the top of the list for most ever professional wins, in front of his class of 92 compatriots, which is just another example of the extraordinary consistency John has produced during his 30-plus year stint as a professional snooker player. Those who have watched my previous videos will know that I've been keeping a watchful eye on Judd Trump as he continues his pursuit of a ton of tons this season. 7 centuries last week has taken his total for the season up to 86. And as I said, as long as he is somewhere in the 90s by the time he gets to the crucible, then I fully suspect he will make that record. Another tournament though has gone by without Judd Trump winning, which makes it 3 full months since he last lifted a trophy, which you know what is something of a slump for him by his own standards over the past couple of years. But all kidding aside, he still looks very, very good, and you have to fancy that he'll pick up at least one of the remaining 3 events this season. But of course, the most pleasing thing of all for me is that I get to make a second video this season where I can celebrate another title for my boy Neil Robertson, who was superb last week. He was solid in his opening couple of matches, but then from 3-1 behind in the quarterfinals went on to produce his best stuff. The semi-final fight back was unplayable, the way he won those last 3 frames against Sean Murphy, and then he was at his clinical best in the final. Now yes, I can't deny the fact that Bingham was not at the races at all, but Neil was in no mood to give him anything in that final. It's the 4th time a multi-session final has been a whitewash, and Neil is now responsible for half of them, having beaten Zhao Yulong 9-0 in the European Masters 5 years ago as well. And above all else, I think we can pretty safely say that Neil is back, like properly back. He had a good first half of the season with his win at the English Open, and he reached a couple of other quarterfinals, but oddly enough, O'Sullivan's last-minute pullout from the Masters may just have been the best thing to happen to Neil this season, because that is where he produced, at least in my opinion, his best performance in over 2 years in beating Higgins. He followed that up with good showing in Germany, and then again last week, and His ability to walk all over players through brutal potting and break building is what made him such a success during that period between 2019 and 2022, and he looks like he's rediscovered that touch again. But perhaps the biggest result from him last week is he is now guaranteed a spot at the Crucible this season. The win has shot him up to 11th in the world on a live ranking list, and then when we look at the Race to the Crucible list, he is 10th and potentially could rise even higher for maybe a top 8 seeding at the Crucible, depending on how he does at the Players in the Tour Championship. And as I have over my last few videos, I will dedicate the end of this video by looking over that Race to the Crucible list because it has changed once again. Bingham, of course, had a final to forget on Sunday, but wins over Judd Trump, Mark Selby and Mark Williams have catapulted him into contention for a Crucible seeding, despite having done precious little all season. He's qualified for the Players' Championship, and if he gets the results he needs, he could make it to the Tour Championship, and if he does, he may just have a chance at automatically getting to the Crucible. Shaun Murphy, now we've talked a lot over the past few weeks about him being in danger of missing out on the Crucible, but he now finds himself safely back in the top 16 on that list following his semi-final last week. He of course has a lot of money falling off his total over the next couple of tournaments, but with players like Ali Carter, Jack Jones, Jack Lazowski and Gary Wilson all out of the running, it looks incredibly unlikely that the Magician won't be at the Crucible this season. And with that, the picture looks a lot clearer. I'll echo what I said last week, that I don't particularly like the fact that all 3 of these tournaments are played back to back to back, because there is limited chances for these seedings to change, and we know that 12 of the men playing next week will ultimately end up at the Tour Championship a couple of weeks later. The good news for us fans in the UK, though, is all remaining tournaments that are left this snooker season will all be on terrestrial TV, so no need to worry about TNT or any other subscription services until at least next season. I'll be back at the end of the week to preview next week's Players' Championship, and for those of you who don't already know, it is a mere 40 days exactly until the Crucible returns.